All right, good morning, everybody. Happy day 2 of NCLS. My name is Cadet First Class Robert Scriven, and it's my privilege to welcome you to this 29th Annual National Character and Leadership Symposium session. Our honored guest speaker for this morning's session is Dr. Christian B. Miller. Dr. Miller is the A.C. Reed Professor of Philosophy at Wake Forest University. He is currently the director of the Honesty Project, which researches and applies the philosophy and psychology of honesty. He is the author of over 100 academic papers, as well as 5 books, a science contributor for Forbes, and his writings have also appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, and Christianity Today. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to present to you Dr. Christian Miller.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Wow. I guess you can. And how about in the back? Is it good? Awesome. Good morning. That was mediocre. Good morning. Okay, that's much better. Come on. I'm thrilled to be here. I spoke yesterday about this topic, and I thought it was really fun to hear responses and questions and engagement afterwards. So I'm going to go for about 45 minutes, save about 15, 20 minutes at the end. I really want to hear your questions and thoughts, so please be formulating them as we go through this. I have some slides, great, and let's see. I can point in that direction, super. So, ready to dive in? Let's get to it. I'm an academic, as you heard. I'm a philosopher. I am not going to be talking a lot about lived real-world experience, but I am going to try and make this practical and applicable towards the end of the talk. We're going to start with some philosophy, move to some psychology, and then get to practical application at the end. So, centered around these 3 questions. What is honesty? Are most people honest? And how can we become more honest as people? This has to do with research that we're doing at Wake Forest and Carnegie Mellon on honesty with the Honesty Project, so you can check out our website and see some of the other things we're doing there. Before we get into the real meat of the talk today, why should we spend time on this topic? Why is this an important topic? Well, at other places, I probably would spend a lot of time explaining this. Here, we all agree, right? Honesty is a very important topic. I don't think I have to say much to try and convince you of that. I think you already probably agree. But here are a few things. We are inspired by exemplars of honesty, like this one right here, Abraham Lincoln. By acting honestly, we show respect for others, to treat them as persons with dignity, and demonstrate that we value their autonomy. There's a real connection to the topic of this conference, of ethics, respect, and dignity when it comes to honesty. Honesty promotes trust and credibility and prevents harm, and it fosters healthy relationships and strengthens organizations and societies. So I think I'm saying something very controversial when I say honesty is a virtue. It's important to cultivate in society in general, and it should be part of a good moral education. Here's another reason. This has to do with some empirical research we've done at Wake Forest. This is members of my team have been looking at what is important as far as when we see other people. What do we value in other people? Specifically, let's see, does this have a laser? No, okay. So specifically on the top, liking. What is most important when it comes to liking other people? In the middle, respecting. On the right-hand side, knowing. We asked participants to take 60 different traits and rank them in terms of their importance with respect to liking, respecting, and knowing. Look what was tops in all 3 cases. It was honesty. Does that resonate with your experience? You can ask yourself. What do you respect the most in your peers, in your professors, in your leaders? If you agree with this data here, it would be honesty. What do you like the most in your friends? It would be honesty. What do you want to know the most about someone who you don't know very well? It's whether they're honest or not. So this is really, I think, important and significant research that confirms what we're talking about is time well spent. And this is a little bit more lighthearted, but I think it's still making good points. Honesty gets a lot of attention when it's missing. There, who's that? Shout out, anyone know? Bernie Madoff, right. Everyone knows who that is. Students, cadets, you know who that is. Professors here have no idea who that is, but I'm sure all the cadets know who that is. Same thing with that there, and we'll pass over that one. All right, so when it's missing, and it sadly is often in this world, we also take notice of it. It makes a big impact on society. So what are we talking about now with this question of honesty? I'm a philosopher. I got to start by defining my terms. It bothers me if I don't know what I'm talking about. So I guess let's get a little clarity on the topic. Here are some preliminary distinctions. I'm not going to be focused on honest actions, particular acts of honesty. I'm not going to be focused on momentary thoughts of honesty either. I'm going to be focused on statements like this. Roberts is an honest person. I spent enough time with him to know that he is really dishonest, and you don't want to be his friend. Her honesty really stands out in her application. We should definitely hire her. What are we talking about here? Well, character. I'm going to focus on honesty as a character trait, part of our character, part of our psychology that gives rise to thoughts, gives rise to motivation, gives rise to behavior, but is more foundational, more fundamental than those things. Let's go a little deeper. It's a character trait that is virtuous, it's a good character trait, and it has some features to it. It's cross-situationally consistent. Okay, now he's getting academic. Oh boy, he's already getting his philosophy lingo. I'm going to tune out. Don't tune out. Stay with me. Cross-situationally consistent, that means across all the situations that are relevant to honesty, not just the courtroom, the classroom, it's at home, at work, at the party, at the conference. Honesty is meant to play a role. Stable over time. It would be really weird if you were just Tuesday honest. Be like, right? Be absolutely bizarre. Say, I'm an honest person, but just on Tuesdays. Like, what are you talking about? No, it doesn't work that way. If we're talking about honest people are honest every day of the week after week, month after month, year after year. Make sense? Okay. Onward. It's an excellence of character. It's intrinsically good. It's a virtue, after all. It has a cognitive component, so it impacts how we think about the world. When we think, it's important to be honest. That's part of the cognitive component of honesty. An affective or motivational component, and a behavioral component. So it speaks to our emotional lives, it speaks to our thinking lives, and it speaks to our outward behavior. And I'm going to say a little bit about these last two parts today. I'm not going to get into everything in the interest of time, because I want to get to some other cool stuff too. So how about that behavioral side? When you think about honesty and you think about failures of honesty, what is probably the one that jumps out the most right away? What's the leading way to fail to be honest? Lie. I heard several people say lie, right? And that's usually number one on the list. You got Pinocchio right there confirming it, but it's not just lying. So, and your honor code here speaks to this as well. Honesty also works against cheating, stealing. Is that it? Well, it looks like I saved some space, so probably not. Promise breaking, hypocrisy, self-deception, BSing. I didn't know if I was allowed to say the full word, so I'm just going to go with BSing. Misleading, and other things, like fraud, for example. It covers a lot of ground. It's a really broad scope virtue. It does a lot of moral work in preventing lots of different kinds of behavior. See the point? But what is it at its core? What fundamentally is honesty? That it pertains to all these different kinds of behavior. If we could boil it down and distill it to one sentence, here's what I would say it is. Someone who is honest has a character which does not intentionally distort the facts as he or she sees them. So an honest person does not do that, does not misrepresent reality in his or her behavior. If I got up here right now and said, hey, greetings from Duke University, I'd probably get fired from my job. Wake Forest would never welcome me back, but I would be misrepresenting to you where I'm coming from. I'm not a faculty member at Duke University, faculty member at Wake Forest University. So that would be a failure of honesty, intentionally distorting the facts as I see them. Illustrating this for lying, an honest person reliably does not intentionally distort the facts as she believes them to be by telling lies about those facts to others. And then we could say the same thing about cheating, stealing, but I'm not going to do it for your sake and mine. Smith tells his teacher that the dog ate his homework. Anyone ever try that? Be honest. It's appropriate. Anyone ever try that excuse? It seems like such a lame excuse, but it's a kind of famous one. So what's going on? Smith, of course, the dog didn't eat the homework, but Smith is just intentionally distorting the facts in telling the teacher that his dog ate the homework and trying to get away with it and thereby get the teacher to believe something that's not the case, but thereby also avoid punishment. Okay, so I could say a lot more about that, but I'm going to press ahead to motivation. So on this way of thinking, it's not just enough to outwardly behave well. Hey, this person tells the truth, they don't cheat, they don't steal, they don't lie, etc. They must be honest. I don't think so. It matters why you're doing those things. What's your heart like? What's behind the action? See the point? Right, so I want to say that some kinds of reasons or motives for telling the truth, for example, are virtuous and some are not. If I said to you, I'm coming from Wake Forest, and the only reason I'm saying that is to make myself look good, or I don't know, avoid punishment, I don't know, whatever, that's not going to be a virtuous kind of motivation. In fact, all self-interested motives or reasons are not going to be virtuous. And what's left? Well, I'll give you some other examples of things that can count, that should be fine on my way of thinking. Why did you tell the truth about your past business failures when it would have been so much easier to lie? He deserved to hear the truth. Does that sound okay? Thumbs up? I think it's okay. I don't lie to my friends. Thumbs up? I like that one too. It's important for us to be able to trust each other. Thumbs up? I like that one. I would not have been honest. It would not have been honest. Good? I'm going to give that one a thumbs up. So maybe you disagree. We can talk about it in the Q&A. But these are 4 different answers someone could give. They're very different. I can't collapse them down into the same thing, or I can't see a way to just reduce them down to one. So I'm going to say let them all count as virtuous. Here's another one. Cheating. Why didn't you cheat on the test when you could have gotten away with it? Question we've all wrestled with. That would not have been fair. Thumbs up. I don't want to disrespect Professor Miller. Thumb way up, right? The best one of all. So that's the one that you should be giving, or my students should be giving in my class. What if everyone were to cheat? That would be a terrible world to live in, and it would not have been honest. Thumbs up on those 2, I think. So I'll skip over one more illustration. The point should be clear at this, and then sum it up. We get a motivational pluralism here. Loving motives for honest behavior. Justice motives, friendship motives, as well as dutiful motives, because I think it's the right thing, because it's my duty, because God commanded me, because it's part of the moral law, as well as because it would be dishonest, or because it would be the honest thing to do. Honesty motives. So all of these different kinds of motives for me count as perfectly fine, as virtuous. When it comes to the virtue of honesty, I don't want to exclude any of them. Those self-interested ones, though, I get more nervous about that. Okay, is the picture fairly clear? Making sense? You don't have to agree with it, it's just making sense. That's all I'm shooting for right now. Good? Onward? Okay. If you're not philosophically inclined, it's time to wake up. We got past the philosophy, now we'll do some empirical stuff. Any psychology majors, minors here? Behavioral science majors, minors? What? A couple? Okay. Well, this is your moment now. Are most people honest? This is not a philosophical question. Primarily, I can't just sit here or stand here, as the case might be, and think really hard. What's the answer? Okay, you can though. Okay, you say yes. Okay, well, I'll give you some options here. You can answer this question a couple different ways. Most people have the virtue of honesty. That's one way to answer it. A couple of people already said yes. Most people have the vice of dishonesty. Most people occupy a middle space between honesty and dishonesty. They're a mixed bag. Should we do a little vote? How many of you go with the first option? Most people have the virtue of honesty. How many people go with the second option? Most people have the vice of dishonesty. How many people go with the third option? We're in the middle. Oh, wow, look at that. You exactly nailed it. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. I got too excited. That's where we're going to end up. That's how I interpret at least the data that we're going to see in a few minutes. And so we can skip the section. Just move on. I don't really have to convince you of anything. You're already, no? Okay, we'll still look at it. Okay. There are other options. You could say people are roughly equally split between having the virtue and having the vice, like 50-50. You maybe even split roughly a third across the 3 categories. So there are lots of different possibilities here. What's the answer? Well, it depends on where you look, perhaps. We could look to religious texts. We could look to the news. We could look to human history. There are lots of different ways of trying to address this question. I'm going to look to psychological research. I really like experiments which put a whole bunch of people into a given situation and see, do they lie or not? Do they cheat or not? Do they steal or not? What do they do? And what impacts or influences their behavior? So I want to be honest, though, seems appropriate, about the limitations of this data. Up front, I want to be some truth in advertising. There's a bias towards Western populations. There are not many longitudinal studies of participants. And for some areas of honesty, there's not enough good data, sadly. So for stealing, you might not be surprised about that. Can you imagine doing a study of stealing? How would you do that? You could think about that. Promise breaking, not enough good data. Deceiving, not enough good data. But when it comes to lying and cheating, pretty good shape here. I think we have a fair number of studies that I think are pretty trustworthy. So I'm going to give you a little taste of this literature and then see where it takes us. Okay, so for empirically minded people, here we go with some studies. 1976, participants are taking a test. A guy says he has to leave for 10 minutes. Sets a timer for 5 minutes. Don't go past the timer. Stop taking the test when the timer goes off. What do you think they did? Did they? Did they stop? How many people think the majority stopped when the timer went off? How many people think the majority did not stop when the timer went off? Okay, the pessimists are right. 71% went over 5 minutes. They were covertly observed through a two-way mirror. That's how that was found out. Okay, who cares? They went past the timer. So what? Small little wrongdoing. Let's get some other examples. 2013, more recent. This recent evidence also for the paranormal. No, this is part of a cover story. There really is no recent evidence for the paranormal, just in case you were wondering. This is one of these paradoxical situations where you're dishonest in order to do a study of honesty. Got it? Right? So they made up this evidence, but it was relevant because now the participants had to flip the coin 10 times at home, online, so no one could see them, and they were trying to manipulate the outcome with their minds, see if they could get it to flip a certain way. Because if they got $1, they would get $1 every time they got heads. So they were trying to manipulate that coin. Come on, coin, go heads. I'll get $1. But don't cheat. The experimenters were very clear. We want to know the actual results. How did you do? If you cheat, that's going to mess up our study. Please don't cheat. You think they cheated? I've kind of set you up now to see something like that. 6.22 was the average, well above chance. So you kind of see how this is going to go. I'll go quicker now. This is with die rolls instead of coin flips. $1 for 1, $2 for 2. Single roll condition, you would roll the die by yourself. No one would be able to see the result, and then you just report how you did, quotation marks. Multiple roll, you got to roll it 3 times. And you're just supposed to report how you did the first time, but the second and third time, just to make sure the die was fair, you know? You never know. Here we go. Average payments, 3.97 versus 4.45. Well, wait a minute. What's supposed to be the average if it was chance? Help me out mathematically here. I'm a philosopher. There we go. Okay, thank you. Very good, very good. Very loud and clear. So that's right. I did it. And there are people whispering. I couldn't hear them. Thank you for your help. 3.5 was chance. So even in the single roll condition, there was some cheating going on, and it got even worse in the multiple roll condition. Onward. One last study by Shu here. This is my favorite kind of setup, this favorite kind of design for doing these kind of studies. This is from 2011, where participants were taking an actual test. 20 problems, and they were going to get paid 50 cents per correct answer. Does that ever happen in your classes? Should it happen? It'd be very nice, wouldn't it? How many professors we got here? Any professors today? There you go. Think about this. Changing your model here. The students would love it. So in this case, what the question was, would people cheat? Well, in the control condition, they didn't have a chance to cheat. So they would take the test, they would just turn in their materials, and it would be graded for them, cut and dry, no opportunity to cheat. But in the shredder condition, it's a little different. They take the same test, not the same participants, a different group of participants, would take the same test, they would work hard, grade the materials themselves, shred all of their answer keys, and verbally report how they did. And they knew that they could say anything they wanted, including 20, and there would be no questions asked. Okay, got it? Got the idea? So this is not the shredder that was probably used, but it gives you a visual on the shredder. The key thing is the results. So baseline, no opportunity to cheat. 7.97 problems answered correctly. Pretty tough test, right? Only get about 8 out of 20. What do you think is going to happen in the shredder condition? Way up? Yeah, I mean, I kind of set you up. If it turned out to be 8, that would be really surprising at this point, and I would be like undermining everything I've been talking about. But it's not 8. It's 13.22. Right? So is it possible that this group is just so much smarter? That's possible, right? Logically possible. Maybe there's just such a better group of test takers. Do you think that's really what happened? You gonna buy that? Can I sell you some other things if you do? Don't buy that. I think we know what's going on here. But it's not 20. Question, if you're going to cheat, if you're willing to cheat, if you're willing to inflate your results today by 5, why not go all the way to 20? Get paid more. Almost no one did. We'll come back to that in a minute. So summing up some of these studies, we did some general observations. The majority of participants engaged in cheating behavior when they thought they could get away with it, and there was some non-trivial reward associated with cheating. Those two conditions are important. But when participants cheated in the behavioral task, it was usually to a moderate degree and almost never the full amount they were able to. On the coin flips, did they say 10 out of 10? Heads? No, rarely. On the die roll, was it a 6 every time? Rarely. On the shredder, was it 20? No. Almost no one said they got 20. So that's interesting too. And this gives rise to, now we're going to step back, bigger picture. What explains these results? Psychologically, what's going on in the heads of these participants and you and I, such that we would act this way? These participants are not strange, odd, rotten apples or anything like that, so different from us. This is going to generalize to us too. Well, here's the story that has emerged. This is the leading psychological story that exists right now. Most people genuinely believe that cheating is morally wrong, at least in most cases. Is that a good thing? Yeah, that's a good thing. This is a good part of the story. Thank goodness, right? I'm really happy about that from a moral perspective. But side by side with that is a desire. Most people want to cheat if by doing so they can benefit themselves in some way that makes the cheating seem worthwhile, and if they think they can get away with it and not get caught. So we've got these two things going on, both a belief about the wrongness of the cheating and a desire to cheat under certain conditions. You can introspect, is that true of you or not? Don't tell me, I don't want to, keep it to yourself. But you can think, does that describe your psychology? I think it describes my psychology. It doesn't end there. There are a few more pieces to the puzzle. Most people also want others to think of themselves as honest people, and more generally, as good people. So I want you all to think of me as a good person, even if I'm a crazy philosopher, but a good person at least. And I want you all, I imagine you all want others to think of you as a good person. But there's even one more piece of the puzzle. Last elements of the story. Most people want to think of themselves as honest people. So regardless of how you think of me, I want to think of myself as an honest person, and then more generally, as a good person. And you want to think of yourself as a good person, or specifically as an honest person. If this is right, then it's not so surprising to see the data we saw earlier. When you had the shredder, could you get away with cheating and benefit yourself? Yes, right? But why wouldn't you go and thereby say, I got 20 right? What's going to be holding you back from this picture here? Anyone want to? Yeah. Number 4? You're holding up 4. Very good. This number 4 here. It's one thing to fudge a little bit, to bend the rules a little bit, to say, I got 8, but I'm just going to say I got 10. But it's another thing to say, I got 8. I really got 8, but no, I got 20. It's really hard to think of yourself as an honest person if you do that. So the desire to think of ourselves as an honest person keeps our cheating in step, keeps it curbed, as opposed to letting it run wild in most people. Some people, of course, are exceptions, but this is, I think, a natural story to tell about what we're seeing in the experiments. All right, let's wrap up this section. When we combine what we've done so far, how does this explanatory psychological story fit with the conceptual account of what it is to be an honest person? That's a terrible sentence. It's totally an academic thing to say. Here's a better sentence. Is this the mindset you'd expect of an honest person? It's number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Is that what you expect of an honest person? Entirely? I don't think so. I think instead the emerging picture is something like this. How many of you voted to say we're a mixed bag? That's where I ended up too. In 2 senses. One, that's the conclusion I say about most people. And in another sense, I'm probably here too. I'm probably one of those people in the middle too. So that's where I want to end for this part of the discussion. You could ask, well, why not over here? I mean, those results weren't the greatest, were they? Why not say most people are dishonest? And if you want to talk about that, ask me in the Q&A. Why am I going in the middle as opposed to the right? That's a great question. But the key thing is most of us are not honest. And that matters. I'm going to skip over this, but there are a number of reasons why we should care about that. But I think it's pretty clear. If you come to believe that most people are not honest, that's going to impact how you live your life. It's going to impact how this university conducts its business. Right? It's going to start with the assumption that people coming into this school are not honest. And during the course of the 4 years, they're not honest either. And that's going to make a difference to how things are done. At this school, I'm not saying at this school, at every school, and my school included, if that's the default assumption about what people are like coming into the school and what they're like leaving the school. All right, ending for today. Good. I think we'll have plenty of time for Q&A too. Are we hanging in there? We're doing okay? The light, this is such a cool room. I've never been anything like this before. The reflection on here reflects down, right? So cool. Anyway, getting distracted. Back to honesty. So you're thinking, okay, if I buy what this guy says, here's what honesty is like. It involves not intentionally distorting the facts for the right reasons. And secondly, most of us don't live up to that standard. Most of us are not honest. So the third part, what can we do to change this state of affairs? We can do one of 2 things. We can reduce our standards. We can lower our standards to get more people to count as honest. Or on the other hand, we can try and build people up, bring people up so they can meet the standards. What we're trying to do, in other words, is think about the character gap. This is the title of one of my books. The idea being that there's a significant gap between our actual character and an honest character, which we should have. And I'm not a fan of the first approach, of bringing the standards down so more people count as honest. I want to see about how we can elevate our actual character to try and bring it up, shrink the gap that way, and make it closer to the standards of honesty. So a couple of practical, tangible strategies to end for today. So if you're not into the more philosophical or psychological, here's maybe some take-home practical tips that'll be useful going forward. Here I think the psychological picture can be put to good use. If it's right, those 4 things we talked about, the belief and the 3 desires, let's try and augment or strengthen the bits of that, the good parts, and weaken the bad parts. This is a really good part of the psychological picture. Most people genuinely believe that cheating is morally wrong, at least in most cases. Let's get that to do more work for us. Let's strengthen it. Increase the salience of our moral beliefs about cheating, and I'm going to give 2 strategies here, sustained moral reminders and role models of honesty. Both of these are going to be very familiar to you all, and so maybe what I'm doing is just reaffirming what you're already doing here, and kind of celebrating what you're already doing. So, moral reminders. The idea here is to use regular moral reminders that serve to make our moral commitments salient and thereby work against our solely pursuing our own self-interest. And the one I'm going to use as the example is the honor code. Now, having been here, I've realized that maybe that's a tricky example. I've learned that that's a kind of complicated topic here. Is that a fair thing to say? A complicated topic here. So I didn't mean this to be directed specifically at what you're doing here. I just meant in the abstract. In theory, an honor code can be a very useful thing for promoting the good sides of our character and strengthening honesty. Why think that? Well, I mean, it sounds nice, and we all know what the honor code is, so I don't have to spend any time defining it. But there's actually some empirical backing to it, too. Some empirical reason to think that honor codes, when used properly, can be effective. This is going to take us back to the shredder again. A different researcher, a different study, control condition, 3.4. So harder test, too, right? This is 20 problems again, 50 cents per correct answer. Much harder test, so different questions. They will only get 3.4 right out of 20. They had a shredder condition, 6.1. So notice, interestingly, some cheating, but not nearly as much as it could have been. We've already talked about that idea. I'm going to give you in a minute here a third group. And in the third group, they had a shredder condition, but before they took the test, they signed their university's honor code. Okay, got it? So that's what they did first. Then they took the test, 50 cents per correct answer, shredded their materials, verbally reported how they did. Here's how they did. So back down to the control level. That doesn't mean no one cheated, because this is an average, but it looks like not many people cheated. Okay, does that make sense? And what if we incentivize cheating a little bit more? Let's change it from 50 cents to $2. More temptation here. Professors, don't get too nervous. Your students start demanding $2 per correct answer. It's going to be even more financially painful, but it didn't make a difference. Look, even then, when it's $2 per correct answer in the honor code condition, it was still back down to the control level. So this is not the only study. It's the only one that I'm aware of that does a kind of careful experimental manipulation. There are other studies that are not as carefully done as this one, but also have very interesting results. So if you're interested, go check out McCabe's work. 28% of college students at schools without an honor code reported helping another person on a test versus 9% of schools with an honor code, plagiarism, unauthorized crib notes, and unpermitted collaboration. So one thing to jump out at you, I hope, is this seems to move the needle. It seems to matter. But another thing that might jump out at you is it's not a solution that's going to eliminate cheating. It doesn't promise to be able to stop it completely. After all, on all these here, there is some cheating still going on. There's not going to be any solution out there, as far as I know, at least any reasonable solution, that is going to just bring the cheating rates down to zero. We're talking about trying to lower it as opposed to, I mean, of course, you want to eliminate it, but lowering it is the goal here. And that would be a worthwhile goal to strive for. Okay, some other examples besides the honor code of moral reminders. There are lots of forms this can take. Here are some other illustrations. A daily reading with rich ethical content. It could be a religious reading if you're religious. It could be a secular reading if you're not. Confession. That could, of course, take a religious direction in terms of religious confessions, but that's not what I require or have in mind here on the slide. I'm not saying it wouldn't be a good thing, but it doesn't have to be religious here. It could just be that you have accountability partners, you have friends who you can confide in and confess things to. That serves as a moral reminder as well. More tangible moral reminders. And remember the WWJD bracelets that used to be around, maybe before your time, but anyone remember them? Those were serving as moral reminders, just like the Live Strong ones as well. It could be something that you wear on your body. Those are, and this obviously is not limited to honesty. These can serve as moral reminders across the board. Technology can be used for good here. Text messages, emails, a diary, a daily diary, or just a diary of any kind, where you reflect back on your day or on your week, and you ask yourself questions like, how well did I live up to my own standards of honesty? Where did I fall short, and how can I grow and become better going forward? All right, so that idea is the idea of moral reminders. I'll give you one other idea I'll develop with a little bit of detail. and then we'll go quickly to the question and answer after that. This one is also very familiar to you all. So, 22, 23, 24. Okay, I was wondering, is it either missing it or this audience has a certain kind of configuration? Good, we got to 24. Very good, very good, very good. So I sounded like I was like kind of tapped in or knew what I was talking about. I only learned about this yesterday. So I was very interested to learn about how you think about exemplars and role models here, and that was really cool. So here's some other role models. Lincoln, Harriet Tubman, Leopold Sosha. Anyone know him? Heard his name before, Leopold Sosha? Not as famous one like the other two. Saved 20 Jews during World War II by hiding them in a sewer system for a year and a half. And what that meant was having to walk on his hands and knees through the filthy sewer pipes to bring them food and water every day for a year and a half. It's a remarkable story. So the idea here is that these role models can do a couple things. They can be a basis for admiration. We admire them for their lives, or at least I would want to say a certain part of their life, because often we'll find some not so pleasant or not so positive parts of their lives too, so we may not admire them across the board, but a certain part of their life, like honesty, like courage, and like compassion. But not just admire them at a distance, we can admire them in such a way that we're inspired by them. They emotionally move us to want to elevate our character to be more like their character. Not bring their character down to our level, but bring our level up to their level. All right? And in the context of students here, professors can do something like this. Have students research, and you do this already, so no surprise here. Other places, this is a brand new idea that hasn't been seen before, but here I think it's perfectly familiar, so it's just more reaffirming what you're doing already. Research and ideally interview a relevant and attainable exemplar of honesty, with an emphasis on the student's emotional responses to learning about the exemplar's honesty. Where certain factors make a difference here, the exemplar being relevant to my life and my situation, the exemplar being attainable, or at least thought to be attainable. If this person is so superior to me, so much better, actually that can have a negative impact. It can discourage me. It can turn me off. I can give up. So relevant exemplars, attainable exemplars, and exemplars where I can have an emotional connection to them. Not just an intellectual connection, but actually emotionally bond with them. Those matter a lot. So those are the two main strategies I'm going to emphasize. I'll give you a couple quick final thoughts, and then I'll end, and we can go to the questions. So one final quick thought is don't forget the bad side of our psychology too. I'm trying to so far I've been playing up the good side, that belief that cheating is wrong, trying to emphasize and strengthen that. But we also probably want to diminish the negative side, diminish this desire here to cheat. What can we do to weaken that so it doesn't have such an impact? Well, of course, one strategy here is going to be punishment. So increase the punishment for cheating, which will diminish the desire to cheat, unless you think you can get away with it and avoid the punishment. You make the punishment harder to avoid, it's going to be harder to exercise this desire. I'm not opposed to this strategy at all. I think, look, if most of us are not honest, you got to start somewhere. And it's a reasonable place to start, trying to diminish this desire. It's not perfect, though, because if you're not cheating so as to avoid punishment, is that virtuous? No, all right? It may take you in a virtuous direction down the road. Over time, you might not cheat, and suddenly you start to see things in a different way, and you start to care about other things besides avoiding punishment. So your motivation can grow and expand and evolve over time and get better. But as an initial kind of motivation, it's not the best, but it may be a good starting point nonetheless. Other approaches, though, would not focus on punishment as much as they would focus, I would suggest, on something like love and compassion. So fostering love and compassion for others will work directly against a desire to cheat them. Okay? And that should have intuitive plausibility. So, and that's what this says up here. So this kind of love is fundamentally incompatible with the desire to cheat someone else for self-interested gain. To the extent to which I want to lie or cheat to my children, parents, or wife without good reason, I thereby do not love them as much as I could. So the extent to which we can foster in ourselves and others a loving mindset, a compassionate mindset for others, that will also have the nice tangible benefit of weakening that desire to cheat them. And that's all for the better. So I'm going to wrap up at this point. Plenty more work to do, lots of questions we can talk about next if you like. Is lying ever permitted? Should we always be honest? Why not say most of us are dishonest? What other strategies are there to improve, to close this character gap? I'd love to hear some more, hear what's on your mind, but I'm going to stop. So thank you. A little mention of the book here and people who funded the research, and I welcome your questions. Thank you for putting up with me.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Miller. At this time, there are some microphones on the left and right of the stage, and you can come forward and ask questions.
I always like to give priority to students. So, sorry, cadets. If you want to go first, you're welcome to ask too, but I always want to make sure cadets feel very comfortable and students feel very comfortable asking questions too. So please don't hold back. Go ahead.
In your introduction, I found myself in the group that thought most people were honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that influences the data because you expect that I think you're going to be honest. It tends to make you more honest. Perhaps I'm putting myself in the position of an exemplar. And I think the school tries to provide exemplars who are honest to encourage people to be honest.
Right.
I have to admit my thinking on this isn't quite complete, but I think I tend to think that people are going to be honest up until they prove me wrong.
Okay, yep.
And I think that's a very healthy attitude. And I would appreciate your comments on
Sure,
this.
sure. Great. So nothing that I said nothing about what I said should be taken to diminish the importance of trying to be honest. I think it's very important to try to be honest. I think honesty is a really good thing we should strive for. It's an ideal that we should hold everyone to. So nothing changes about that. What I'm interested in is, as a matter of fact, how good are we? And that's an empirical question. It's a factual question. I don't have much control over, whether I like it or not. Just what are the facts? And the facts, as far as I can tell, with lots of hesitancy and qualification, we don't have exhaustive data. Right now, the best picture that I can see emerging from the data is one in which we fall short of the standards of honesty. The most of us are a mixed bag of good and bad. Now, what should going forward should you do? You could have a default assumption of, I'm meeting a person for the first time, I'm going to assume that they're honest. You could still do that. And then get to know them better and maybe correct your view of them based upon what you learn. However, I would say, look, if most people, according to data, are not honest, then I would want that to be my default assumption. I'm going to say, I don't know whether you're honest or not. I'm going to get to know you, and I'm going to let that shape my view of you, but I'm going to start with the default assumption of wait and see. And in particular, if I have a really rosy picture of everyone I meet, that could open up the door to being not taken advantage of per se, but the other side, the mixed side of the character coming forward and not expecting that to come forward. Where if I have a more realistic picture of people's character, then I expect sometimes people are going to act well, sometimes people are going to act poorly, and I should be aware of that from the start. Yeah.
Well, I think our goal, all of us, beyond the school, is we want people to be honest.
Yes, me too.
And I think assuming they're honest is perhaps a good step toward that goal.
Okay, I'll give you a further thought. Some people have this idea, this came up in our cadet critique session yesterday, How many of you were there? Was anyone there? A couple people were, okay. So there's this idea where even if I think that most people are not honest, it's still a good idea to label them as honest. So that, you all, I'm sure, look, you all, I'm sure, are very exemplary. You are definitely not part of the most people are not honest. You're part of the honest group. But that was meant to be a joke. Okay, never mind. But if you could have this approach where you label people as honest even though you don't think they really are. And because in labeling them as honest, and if that label sticks, and if they take it and internalize it, then they're going to be motivated to try and live up to the label. And then thereby can become more honest in the long run. Right? That is another strategy that I didn't cover up here. It is a viable strategy. So again, the idea is, let's go out and label people as honest or as good, even though they might not be. Because if they internalize the label, then they're going to be much more motivated to try and live up to the label to satisfy social expectations. I didn't put it up here because I'm just not so comfortable with that approach. Because what it involves, in my opinion, is dishonesty. Right? You're being dishonest in labeling someone with a label that you don't think they really deserve to have in the first place. And I can't, as an ethics professor who's trying to be a good person, comfortably do that to other people. So I didn't put it up on the slides. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Sir, Cadet Third Class Dom, Cadet Squadron 17. So you mentioned that most of the research favors Western populations.
Yep.
From your observations, how does honesty show itself in other cultures?
No idea. Yeah, that's the honest answer. So, how does it show itself? Well, where do we look? We could look to, famous writings. We could look to writings of Confucius, for example, in Chinese culture. But if we're going to be looking, kind of use the same standard across the board, we would be looking at experimental studies. There are almost no experimental studies outside of Western populations. So that's why I said we have no idea. I would, now if you ask me okay, I'm going to give you license to purely speculate without any data. Like, just tell me, what do you guess is going to happen? I'm going to answer, I think the results are going to be pretty much similar cross-culturally. There'll be some variation, but not significant variation. But just take that for what it is, pure speculation, because we don't have the data. Sorry. It's the honest but unsatisfying answer. Yeah. Should we alternate? Yes.
Okay. So C3C, Lauren LeDuc from Cadet Squadron 19. I was wondering if you feel a generational degradation of honesty has existed in the past, like whatever it's given centuries or 50 years, but what your opinion was on that.
Yep. So, great question. So the question was, have you seen a generational shift, or has honesty increased over time or decreased over time? One thing we have to clarify, what time frame are we using? Are we using hundreds of years? Are we using decades? Are we using very short intervals of time? I think you said generations, so maybe we'll just use like in the last 10 years, or last 20 years, last 30 years. Is that okay?
So I was saying like last 50-ish, but that.
Yeah, 50. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the disappointing, cheap answer, but then I'll give you the speculation too. So in order to answer that question, how would you do that carefully? You would have a measure of honesty that was given in the 1980s, and then given in the 1990s, given in the 2000s, the 10s, and now, and the same measure, and a really good measure of people's honesty. We haven't even talked about how to measure it besides these kind of studies I put up here. And then we want to see change over time. Take a guess. Have there been such studies done? Yeah. It's a cheap answer, again, not cheap as a matter, the disappointing answer. Now, if you want me to speculate, maybe you don't want me to speculate, but if I'm going to do it anyway. My speculation is that it's gotten worse. And that there is increased, now in what ways? Is it that there's increased desire to cheat, or there's more opportunity to cheat, for example? So in what ways has it gotten worse? That, well, we pretty much still desire to cheat as much as we always did before, but now we have some new avenues or opportunities, or it's easier to do it than it was before. I would say certainly in that sense, it's gotten worse. One very tangible instance of this is social media, the internet, interest. So to expand on this a little bit, there is interesting research on honesty with respect to social media. Turns out counterintuitively that places like Facebook, LinkedIn, texting, emails are fairly honest. But when it comes to other things like, and even dating sites are pretty honest, surprisingly, maybe. But other things like anonymous posting or using Twitter with anonymous accounts and so forth. Obviously, widespread dishonesty because of the veil of anonymity. So for those kinds of reasons, I think, it's just pure speculation, again, that it's gotten worse because the opportunities to be dishonest are so prevalent and so easy to avail oneself of. Yeah, thank you. Yes?
Good morning, sir. I'm C3C Swartzmiller from Cadet Squadron 30, and you describe honesty as a virtue, so does that mean you think it would fall under the doctrine of the mean? And if so, like, where would you draw the line of too much honesty?
Where do I draw the line between, sorry?
Too much honesty.
Ooh, yeah, good question. Yeah, are you a philosophy major?
Minor.
Which one?
Minor, sir.
Minor, okay. Change it to major. No, great, yeah, good. So, so the question for everyone, just give the background on this one. The question is, does honesty obey the doctrine of the mean? Well, what's the doctrine of the mean? According to Aristotle, every virtue is a mean between at least two vices. A vice of excess and a vice of deficiency. So in the case of courage, there's a vice of excess, rashness, a vice of deficiency, cowardice, and we can generalize that across the board to every virtue, right? That's what you're thinking of. Aristotle thought that. I don't think that, though. I think actually honesty disproves Aristotle's framework. Now, I'm kind of an outlier in this. It's very controversial. You can definitely push back on this. I don't think honesty follows this. Of course, there's a vice of deficiency. That's dishonesty. But I don't think there's a vice of excess. We do say things like you're being too honest. So it sounds like it could be a vice of excess. You're being too honest, after all. I mean, that sounds like a bad thing. It's not like a compliment that people are given. But I would actually take those cases and understand them in terms of a failure of a different virtue. So let me make them a little more concrete. So, I see Robert here this morning. He says, "How was your night?" And I start sharing all this stuff like, I went to the bathroom these many times, and I woke up in the middle of the night these many times, and I weighed myself, and it was this amount on the scale, and he's like thinking, wow, how'd I get assigned to this Miller guy? So what am I doing? Everything I'm saying is accurate. I'm being honest. I'm oversharing, right? I'm being too honest to him, who I just met 2 days ago. Well, what is that a deficiency or a failure of? That's a failure of tact or discretion, I think. It's a failure with respect to another virtue. It's not a failure of honesty. I'm being perfectly honest. I'm not intentionally distorting the facts in any way. Everything I say is a reliable and accurate depiction of what I believe. So I don't think there's a vice of excess for honesty. Yeah, thank you. If you want to afterwards follow up, anyone, of course. I know that's a lot more to say there. Yes.
Good morning, sir. Cadet Bergman from Texas Tech University. I think it's pretty common practice for parents to lie to their kids about things that don't matter. And how do you think that affects us as young adults, like after we've been not lied to, but just made excuses for when you don't want to explain something to a child?
So growing up, many parents will be dishonest in some way or other to their children, and it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be because they want them to believe certain things that are magical. That wasn't what you had in mind. But they might, lie to them about, and then fill in the blank for your relevant holiday. But you were thinking, no, what about this other case of, I just don't want to take the time to explain it. Maybe it's too complicated, or it's not age appropriate yet to talk about such and such. Later on, I'll tell you so I'm just going to distort it because you're not ready for it. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's
Yep,
correct.
yep. I don't have a problem with that necessarily. I might have to go case by case to see exactly what was done. I'm a philosopher who needs to see cases and details and then evaluate what happened in that particular case. I don't have a problem with packaging the material in such a way that the audience can understand it. If the audience is a 5-year-old, I've got 3 kids, I do it all the time. So maybe I'm just like rationalizing myself. But my kids can't understand sex yet, whatever. I don't want them to, at least, put it that way. And so I don't, go into all that. Now, if I, though, intentionally distort the facts so that I outright lie to them or do something quite misleading, then that changes the equation. Then it looks like I'm being dishonest. Could I be all things considered justified in doing it, though? So I might be being dishonest towards them, but still it'd be morally permissible. Because it might be that I'm failing in this respect, but it's for a greater good. Or it's respectful of them and where they are in life, so respecting them outweighs being honest to them at this point. And so it's okay to be dishonest, but still all things morally permissible. That's a couple of additional thoughts, but do you want to, I don't think I completely addressed what you were talking about.
It's how that affects us as young adults after we've
Yeah.
experienced.
I mean, it certainly can have a number of different effects. So one is, okay, now I find out what the richer story was, and now I lose my trust or confidence in authority figures who earlier didn't tell me that richer story. And so it could foster a kind of skepticism or a kind of generalized lack of trust in authority figures telling me things anymore. So one concrete manifestation of this would be parents who told their children about Santa Claus growing up. Later on, the kids learn about Santa Claus, and then they think, well, I don't trust you anymore about Santa Claus, and I don't trust you anymore about Jesus either, or about some other religious topic that you've been teaching me. Why should I trust you here when I can't trust you here anymore? So one tangible consequence could surely be fostering a general skepticism or cynicism about the reliability of an authority figure. Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I was not one I had thought about in a lot of detail, so I was kind of thinking about it as we were talking. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Miller. Unfortunately, we're just about out of time, so I think we'll have to cut it off there.
Sorry.
Sorry, y'all. Dr. Miller, thank you again for your time today, and thank you for enriching our view of ethics and respect for human dignity. And on behalf of our 2022 NCLS participants, the Cadet Wing, and the faculty and staff of the Air Force Academy, we'd like to present you with a small token of our appreciation.
Okay. Hey, where are you going? Take it. No. It'll be hard to fit on the plane. But thank you so much. It's very, very kind of you.
Thank you.
Very grateful.
Yes, sir. This concludes our session. We'd appreciate audience feedback at our testimonial booth on the south side of A Hall. Also, at the end of your NCLS experience, we invite you to take the cumulative survey on the event app or via the link sent email after NCLS closes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. I'll stay around a little bit. If you didn't get a chance to ask your question, feel free to come.